Welcome to Leader Podcast, the ultimate destination for medtech insights, leadership inspiration, and the latest innovation. I'm Stephanie Plea, founder of Tribe Agency and your host for Leader Podcast. Join us on Leader Podcast today, episode 20, where we welcome Dr. Shirin Tofai, a renowned general surgeon and a trailblazer in medical device innovation. She's known for her pioneering work in hernia repair and is also now developing a gender-specific medical device for hernias. Dr. Tofai brings a wealth of expertise and leadership to the field. Now let's get into the episode. Welcome to episode 20 of Leader Podcast, and this is a Leader Podcast first. We have a physician and surgeon on Leader today, and actually someone that I have a past with that I used to work with when I worked at Intuitive. So I want to welcome Dr. Shirin Tofai to Leader Podcast. Dr. Tofai, welcome.
Thank you so much. This was not planned, by the way.
You didn't I know. We just figured it out.
We knew each other. Yeah.
Well, I knew. I mean, I saw, I went back and forth with your PR team and I said, oh, I know Dr. Tofai, and absolutely I can have her on the podcast. So
very sweet.
Thank you for being on, and I'm excited to get into this. We've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, thanks. Because you know me as a doctor, but you don't know me as a medical device.
I do not. I just found out. So myself and all of our audience will now know what's going on. And you've always been a multi-talented individual. I remember early days of hernia, which we can talk about how we know each other here in a second. But the early days of hernia, you were the front runner. You were the one out marketing and really letting everyone know that this is done with the Da Vinci and it's surgical, repairs above and beyond what everyone else was doing. And I always remember you kind of leading the charge. I love to see business-driven physicians. I love that. I personally tell every surgeon that they should go and get their MBA because I think it makes a huge difference in how you approach your business. And sadly, for patients listening, it is about the business. It's about the patients, but it obviously is a business ultimately. So let's talk about how we know each other.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I 100% agree with that, by the way.
Yes,
we are not only not taught the business, but there's some kind of general sense that you should be dissuaded from the business. And then the minute you graduate, you're like, oh, even if you're like an employed surgeon where technically the business decisions are not in your hands, you still have to be able to practice the business of medicine by even billing. So they don't teach you any of that in residency.
Yeah.
That needs to change.
So my entire career, I've worked with surgeons just like you, and obviously that's how we know each other, and I'll get to that in a second. But what I have found is that is the missing class. So if anyone's running a medical school right now and listening, please add in at least a couple business classes. Just how do you market yourself? How do you have your business make a profit? Revenue generating exercises, all the things. Basically, a mini MBA needs to go into all medical schools going forward.
100%.
It's a huge disservice to the surgeons and the physicians that try to run a practice and also try to stay ahead of profit and just making a living. And paying off all the crazy debt that you guys have all gotten over the years. But
I mean, even if you're like Doctors Without Borders and volunteering your time, you still have to be able to make sure that you have funding to provide all of that kind of free care for areas of need. So
I think, and just we're kind of working backwards, but that's okay. That's what we do on Leader Podcast. I do think in this digital age where most women are, if their husband needs a hernia, just like my husband had a Da Vinci hernia repair, they're the decision makers in the household on healthcare. I think personally, it could be my own data point, but I do believe most women kind of handle the, bumps, bruises, sneezes, sniffles, and all the way up to more serious matters.
Sure.
And given that they all have access to the internet, I do think it's so important now that we're kind of taking a lens quickly around the physician and surgeon path. I do think it's important to know how to market yourself. And I've had multiple conversations with multiple physicians, both on the Da Vinci side and on the Ion side, that is so important. Even if your hospital claims they're doing something in the background, they're not. They're not really distinguishing you from any of your peers. So don't rely on what the marketing team at the hospital is doing for you. Take it within your own hands, and obviously you'll have a better outcome.
That is such an important thing to say because the institution will not allow you to do that usually or promote you to do that, but you can just ask for permission or do it on the side. And I think who knows what your future is after working for a certain institution like mine. I didn't know that I was going to go into private practice after years of being, employed, academically inclined. I'm still academically inclined, but I pay my own bills. I don't have an institution that tells me what to do.
Isn't that a great feeling, by the way?
Yes. I will never go back.
I'll never go back. I say this on every episode, and it sounds like I'm such a hater around like employment of others, but I'm not. Trust me, I am very thankful and grateful for my background in corporate, and all of the companies I've worked for in the past allowed me financially and the experience to take the leap and start my own company. But like you, I enjoy this side of my career better than the previous because there's just so much more fun, and I'll never go back. Anyway, we've alluded to it up to this point. I think it's just very clear that we should say how we know each other.
Yes.
So again, it was total accidental that we were on this podcast together. Was not planned this way, but I used to be a sales manager for Intuitive on the West Coast for actually 9 of the 12 years I was with Intuitive. And Dr. Tofai was like the OG of hernias at that time. For anyone that doesn't know what OG means, original gangster.
Gangster.
She was based out of LA, and she was that kind of marketeer, physician, surgeon. And I remember all too well, you were just collapsing the market around you. I mean, literally, no one could compete. It was just you outpaced them. So if anyone wants marketing tips on how to be a profitable surgeon, I don't want to offer this up to them, but I'm sure she would be happy to take a DM from you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I do. I get a lot of DMs on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
People randomly, reach out to me because they want to kind of follow a similar path. And I'm like, do it. Absolutely do it.
Yeah.
You got to spend a lot of time and effort researching, studying, like this is an actual, you can't just kind of go in there with your eyes closed.
I have a little bit of understanding of your background, but for everyone listening, what is your background? Take me from like origin to current day.
Yeah, so I'm a surgeon, general surgeon. I train very locally. We're in Southern California. I'm an OG Santa Monican. I think OG is an LA gangster term, actually.
Is it?
I think it's a West Coast gang, term.
West Coast? That's about as much rap as I know.
Trained at UCLA for residency.
Okay.
And that was back in 2002 when I graduated. And since then, I've grown to love, within the general surgery world, kind of hernia surgery. And hernia surgery and the whole laparoscopic, minimally invasive is very technology oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So either using implants or medical devices that are like high tech. I love that part of it. In fact, in retrospect, when I wrote I think it was my residency application, you have to write like a personal statement. And I specifically put in there that I want to be an inventor of a surgical instrument or technique. And I've finally gotten to that point where, because my mind kind of works that way.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I chose laparoscopic surgery, robotic surgery, is because there's so much technology and inventorship opportunities. So my first job, I had at USC, I had a adjunct professor kind of title and helped teach at the School of Engineering as a surgeon.
Okay.
Because I think surgeons and engineers should totally work together.
Absolutely.
We have all the problems and the ideas and they can solve it, right? Mm-hmm. That was awesome. And that kind of led me to kind of go down the path of at that time we were inventing image guided surgery, but for general surgery. It already was there for the brain and spine. And then, so now as a hernia surgeon, so much of my practice, I see problems, right? So I do like mesh complications and hernia recurrences and chronic pain and damage. So I look at the products and what's out there, and I'm removing mesh, right? Daily, weekly, I'm removing mesh. And I tell myself, oh, well, if this mesh were only designed with this extra addition or this kind of shape, this patient would not have had this complication or this difficulty, then that's when, while I was in private practice, I started to feel free to start developing, getting patents. We have 9 patents now that have been granted and many more that are in the process, including a European patent, which I'm really excited about because it's so hard to get a European patent. And, the hope is that as a surgeon, the hope is getting involved in medical device design and patenting and so on, so that future patients can be helped. Like you directly see the improvement in healthcare because you find the problem, you develop something, and then that helps the patient. And like that's what really, really makes my life interesting, I think. It's not just seeing patients, solving their problems, operating, but having the ability to develop a device that then doesn't treat like what I do, one patient at a time, but like, hundreds, thousands of patients at a time.
A greater impact.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, again, I know we were talking about this in the pre-call. I'm not surprised that you're a multi-talented, multifaceted, always moving forward type person, myself included. I'm very similar in that way. So I think you like to be on the cutting edge of things. And I definitely think you like to continue to move forward, never stagnant, right? That's what I know of you, which, was many years ago that I worked intuitive. But so right now you're at Cedars. Is that correct?
Yes, I work out of the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. They're great. And actually, if you think about it, of all the different hospitals that I've worked at, I think Cedars has the best kind of tech transfer office, where they don't. A lot of times when you're employed as a doctor and you want to come up with something, you're somewhat disincentivized because the institution owns all of it. And Cedars-Sinai doesn't want to own all of your IP.
Okay.
Your intellectual property.
Yeah.
It's a much better kind of partnership between the surgeon, who may be their employee, and their tech transfer group. I didn't get involved with it because I was in private practice by the time I started with my patents. But for people that do work at institutions which are favorable, I highly recommend they work with their tech transfer office and start developing products.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I was thinking, I have a client actually, since you mentioned engineers need to know surgeons and vice versa. I actually have a client who is an engineer and met his co-founder at UCLA Biodesign. And and I think biodesign, isn't that part of the point, is they put engineers and surgeons and physicians together in the same room. And they also worked together on this solution that hadn't been solved for in neurosurgery. And they've got a really cool device. But I agree with you back on the original statement around engineering is just as important in this medical space.
So important.
Physicians.
So important. And I was a biology major. I wasn't like an engineering major. I liked math, but engineering is a completely different world. When I was in, where was I? I think it was my first job at USC. There was an opportunity to go to Stanford because Stanford was, I think, really the first surgical department that developed a whole biodesign kind of collaboration with engineers. And I almost did that, like to go up there and train with them and get that background. There's always kind of been in me, and doing it on your own is A, exhilarating, B, very expensive. I don't recommend
like everything right now.
Everything.
Like everything.
And yet, if you have a good team, it's. I don't have children, so I don't know if it's like giving birth or raising children, but it's definitely like your baby, and so satisfying to see something go from idea to patent to product.
Well, on that note, let's talk about your babies or your children. So you mentioned you have 9 patents. What are they and what are they doing? Whatever you can disclose. I know some of it might be confidential.
It's all public.
Okay.
We have multiple patents that have been filed. The 9 that were granted are in this family of what we call gender-based mesh designs for inguinal hernia. So groin hernia, You may have seen ads on TV about mesh complications, hernia mesh, pelvic mesh. So there's obviously a problem out there where people are being hurt or damaged by insertion of mesh. Women tend to be more hurt than men. And part of it is a surgical problem, like surgical technique, and you need a better surgeon. But you can definitely improve the design of mesh that's being implanted to help reduce those complications. 80% of my practice is treating those complications. So it's really frustrating when the cadre of mesh I have available or the ones that I remove are so poorly designed. And so, yeah, we came up with mesh, which is different from men versus women.
Mm-hmm.
And up until, continuing, still, we have the same design, same technique, the same mesh for men versus women. Whereas the male pelvis, female pelvis, totally different anatomy, totally different size, different shape, different amount of nerves in them. So, understanding that anatomy and the way that women are more likely to have chronic pain with mesh implants and more likely to have femoral hernias missed and all these other things that I know of as a surgeon, I then designed mesh products to address that.
Okay. So I didn't know any differences between the two genders for mesh. So that's new to me. And I've been out of the hernia game for a few years now. But so are you talking about when you do a ventral repair or an inguinal repair or both? Inguinal.
Mostly
Okay.
inguinal. Yeah, mostly
Okay.
inguinal. The abdominal wall anatomy is fairly similar, although the stresses to the belly from like pregnancy and other kind of female-oriented disease, not diseases. Pregnancy is not a disease. Just
It could be.
medical situations
Yeah.
are different, but the pelvis is the main problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Meaning that it's more narrow, or I guess women's pelvises would be wider, right?
Yeah.
Because
Women's
we
pelvis
deliver babies.
is wider. The size of the different orifices of hernias is different. They're more likely to have femoral hernias or less likely to have direct hernias. They're wider and flatter pelvis. They have a higher concentration of nerves in the area. Their pelvic floor is much more sensitive. So all of those factors make it so that I believe you should have a different mesh design for men versus women. Men tend to have a narrower pelvis, not as much nerves in the area, but you also have a lot more going on towards the testicles. So you got like blood vessels and nerves and muscles going down that women don't have, that in men interact much more with mesh. So as part of the gender-based mesh design, I also have a whole section for the men so that they don't have sexual dysfunction, urinary problems, or testicular pain from a standard hernia repair, which is a horrible thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that you describe obviously I know there's differences in anatomy, but I hadn't really ever thought about how that would impact mesh. So it's interesting. And no one's ever solved for this problem before? This hasn't been something that's ever been a solution? Never came to mind?
It's such a simple thing.
It seems so simple, right? I mean, you have male mesh and female mesh, and they're meant for their anatomy.
Yes, but I'm sure your audience includes a lot of companies in the medtech device kind of world. But the argument is, okay, so now you're making me double the number of SKUs, and is the surgeon or the hospital going to be confused about male versus female? Well, we currently have left versus right products, right? That was never an issue.
Yeah.
But the reality is the female mesh designs that I have can be used for men. And there are different designs where you can kind of combine the male and female benefits into one. So better femoral hernia control, which would benefit females more than men, but then less mesh kind of stickiness on the spermatic cord, which will help mesh men more than women. So there's a lot we can do. And to kind of say, we'll just do everything the way we're doing it. And
we'll just use a generic piece of mesh and cut it the way we need it. Yeah, no,
suffer is not cool.
That makes sense. So now you've got these patents. What's your long game on this? Where are you going with it?
I mean, I want this to be used and become the standard. And I want us to look back and be like, we were putting mesh on the spermatic cord in men and they were having testicular pain and we were like scratching our heads like, why? You don't need an implant on nerves, for example. Why are we putting a mesh on nerves?
Right.
That should not happen. We should design a product that reduces how much mesh is available or interacts with nerves. Why are we getting nerve pain after hernia repair? These are like little tweaks to the current management that can dramatically improve patients and their satisfaction and not have so many lawsuits against. I mean, Becton Dickinson that took over Bard, billions of dollars in lawsuits.
Yep. So how quickly or are you already commercially available, or what's your plan to become commercially available?
So I'm in discussions with major, Fortune couple hundred companies that are interested. Obviously needs to make financial sense for them to do it. Any company that's smart enough to move in this direction will 100% differentiate themselves and kind of move away from all these lawsuits that are drowning their competition.
Yep.
Yeah, I think forward-thinking companies are the ones that are interested. Companies that have more women in their leadership are more interested. And there's already at least one company that found my product interesting enough to develop it, test it, and take it to market.
Okay.
Which is, very exciting to see because the fact that you took my patent design, tested it, took it through a bunch of surgeons, engineers, marketed it, and now it's like up on the big billboards as the next generation for inguinal hernia mesh is awesome. I just need to make sure that
you get paid.
I'm paid for that.
I'm like, it's got to have something to do with money because otherwise none of us work for free.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's validation that you're onto something, right? Especially if it's a big shop that is interested in gaining access to that. It's probably great for you to feel like proof of concept is there, and it's obviously something that'll take hold. Are you going to name it after you, like most inventions in the medical device?
No, you know what? I tell my trainees, never, ever name something after yourself.
Yeah. I think that's the old school, like the old school medical ways, right? I mean, there's so many things that have been named after people.
Well, for example, the Foley catheter and Dr. Foley, great idea, right?
Yep.
People aren't saying what a horrible product this was. Everyone likes Dr. Foley. But if you were that surgeon that named a product after yourself and it was found to cause injury, I know surgeons that had products named after them. They, to this day, even though it's off the market now, they get hate mail and death threats to them.
Oh,
not a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you say this. This is completely outside of medical, but my husband and I have a real estate investment LLC that we started actually when I was still working at Intuitive. We just put our real estate investments through that. And we wanted to name it after our child, which we ended up doing. But we got a lot of counsel not to because of lawsuits, because of if you are in any kind of trouble in the future within that entity, it's not good to have any person's name on it. Right.
You don't want your name associated.
Right. Yeah. That's it. That's a good buyer beware for all of the medical inventions out there that you feel so proud of. You might want to put your name on it. Just another perspective.
It used to be that when I used to work at the county, I had such disaster situations that I was drawn to, and all these like major hernia complications, I was drawn to them, but I was, they would call them tophi hernias. Oh, that's another tophi hernia. So that's cute. Yeah. But yeah, as a product, I don't want that. I don't
Okay.
need it. My ego doesn't need my name on anything.
Right.
Make patients
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Well, so that's exciting that you have that. And so back to commercialization though. So are you looking to just have this be an OEM or an additional product within someone's bag? Is it
Yeah.
going to be for sale to anyone, or are you looking to have it be exited by someone or acquired?
Yeah, well, it all depends. So everything in my portfolio right now is inguinal hernia mesh design based, both for open, laparoscopic, and robotic surgery. So ideally, I would work with a company that would want the entire family
Mm-hmm.
and kind of have me be part of their team to kind of put this,
Implement it.
test it,
Mm-hmm.
get it
Yep.
marketed, and then, you know, at this point, I do have a very positive um, association with
Mm-hmm.
my name and like good hernia outcomes, promoting better care for females with hernias, promoting opportunities to reduce chronic pain in hernias. So I'm happy to leverage my current kind of academic and social
Mm-hmm.
media name to promote a product which I feel very strongly about that would improve care.
Yeah.
That would be ideal. But at this point, it seems that companies are more interested in like a certain line within, like maybe only the laparoscopic meshes or only the
Mm-hmm.
meshes that are focused on like better robotic techniques. So, um, I mean, that's okay with me. I think putting anything out there that can improve healthcare is
Mm-hmm.
very satisfying for me as a surgeon.
Yeah. Well, something that's near and dear to my heart is marketing, obviously. I started a marketing agency. So curious, this is like a labor of love for you. Obviously, you see a huge need. How are you getting people to know about these products? And how are you marketing yourself? And how are you marketing these patents?
Well, because of my leadership within the hernia world, within the American Hernia Society, I'm part of the European Hernia Society, SAGES, which is the big like laparoscopic group. Um, you end up kind of being either approached by different companies to be a speaker or
Mm-hmm.
represent their products. I've never really been good at. I can't say I've been good. I haven't been interested
Mm-hmm.
in kind of lower level stuff. I'm more interested in like the KOL, key opinion leader role
Yeah.
and higher.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, I've been able to make friends and get to know the presidents of the companies as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to the people that are like my local sales rep
Right.
exclusively. So yeah, so I reach out to usually their either the president of the company, which kind of has like the big picture understanding of where they want to take their company, um, or someone kind of maybe one or two uh, further down, which is usually the global marketing person, and then
Mm-hmm.
their R&D person, and kind of pitch it to them.
Got it. So right now you're kind of doing an indirect marketing where you're using the connections you have, the network that you have within the medical device arena. Those that are obviously mesh companies would be the obvious targets. And then you're meeting and speaking with decision makers within those companies.
Yes, that's how
Okay.
I've been doing it. I mean, one option is to build a company where I end up making my prototype and then testing it and developing it
Mm-hmm.
and hoping that within that process someone buys me out.
Mix it up. Yep.
Um, that's I think I'm so busy as a clinical surgeon, it would be hard for me to do that on my own. I'd have to get an entire
Yeah.
whole team, which will be even more expensive than how much
Right.
money I'm already spending
Yeah.
developing the patents. So, but I know many surgeons that do that, and many of them are actually funded by their university. So they
Mm.
made like a deal where it's partially funded by their university, and
Mm-hmm.
that helps offload a little bit of the cost of it.
Okay. Another thing that I think is important as anyone, because a lot of our audience are medtech startup executives similar to yourself, where they have a great product and they're just looking at their go-to-market strategy and how to get it either exited. Because I do have quite a few clients that their motivation is just to get acquired, which is more than fine. Like you just described, it's really hard to start a company and get it to a point of commercialization and revenue.
Yeah.
I just did a social media post yesterday where it said, we were talking about our lead generation services. And I said, if you don't have revenue, it's a hobby. I hate to break it to you, but without revenue, it's a hobby.
Yeah.
So I always want to make sure people go eyes wide in. If you're going to launch a company, it takes a lot to get to revenue, and you don't really have a real company until that first dollar is exchanged. So anyway, side note.
That's very, very true. And I think a lot of companies actually prefer that.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to see you have your product, your
some traction,
your IP, some testing, as opposed to like, just kind of this foo-foo-y like idea.
Yeah.
Because they are the ones that are investing the major bucks to take it to use.
Yeah.
So I understand that for sure.
Yeah. The big thing I think that at least my, very lay approach to this whole mesh world is removing the negative connotations that are associated with any mesh, whether it's female and male mesh or generic mesh.
Yeah.
There is a negative perception of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think out there within the patient community and maybe even within the provider community. So I always say to innovators, market research is everything. And obviously you're an N of one and you have your entire peer group that's more than likely validated, that this is a need and it's something that is a positive for the patients.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing, even if you were to not launch the company, but really position your patents to companies, is that clinical evidence and data and research. And people sometimes shy away from it because they don't want to hear what maybe the audience is going to tell them. But I do constantly harp with our clients, that are actually going and trying to build companies, that you have to validate it, because most of them are physicians. Like a lot of my clients, there's an engineer and a physician, and someone had a great idea and then they just want to get it to a point of commercialization. So I do think it's really important, especially in this mesh arena, to lead with clinical. I know you'd said that
for sure
someone had kind of, did they copycat your patent or they acquire your patent?
I have not been acquired. The product is being made by a major company currently.
Okay. So they've done, without your blessing. Yeah.
Licensing of it. Yeah.
So they've done clinical research though, is what you were alluding to. Okay. And that's been favorable.
Yes.
Meaning there's a positive impact by using gender specific mesh versus just generic one size fits all mesh.
Yeah, that's correct. They're not the current product where I'm alluding to is not being touted as a gender-based mesh, but as a next generation mesh.
Okay.
But it does favorably help women more than men compared to current mesh. Yes.
Okay. And it's like the primary is reducing pain, correct?
Reducing pain, reducing need for reoperation and missing femoral hernias. Yeah.
I mean, that seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It can't be super costly for, Medicare or, providers, patients, hospitals. It doesn't seem like it would be extremely expensive. And it just seems like if there's a better way, if there's a better mousetrap, grab it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I understand business. So I didn't develop a product where you had to completely reinvent a new product, which involves changing how surgeons view and workflows, and you need a lot of education for it. And you have to kind of convince the surgeon that this is the right product. That's not how I designed it. I took what we currently have and I figured out what's wrong with it. And I improved that part.
Yeah.
So if you look at the mesh designs, they look very similar to current meshes, but they're anti-adhesive or kind of less mesh in certain areas that don't need to stick to, like let's say nerves or the nerves to the testicle or spermatic cord. There's better coverage in areas that we need better coverage for, like the femoral space. There's less coverage over areas we don't need coverage for. Like we don't need coverage of the vessels to your leg with mesh. That helps nobody.
Right. And that's being done right now?
Yeah.
Why? Just because it's
That's
too...
how it was designed.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And
But
that's where the
now,
complications are coming from.
yeah. So now we're taking out mesh, and guess what? The mesh is stuck to the major vessels to your
Critical
leg.
vessels.
So
Wow.
most surgeons either say, I'll never take out your mesh. That's too dangerous for an operation. So you're not helping the patient. Or they say, I'll take out the mesh, but you know what? It was really dangerous in there. I left a lot of the mesh in place, which now the patient's left potentially with mesh that was bothering them in the first place, but it wasn't. Or you put mesh in, it's like too much over your psoas muscle. The psoas muscle is the muscle that lets you go up and down stairs, right?
Yeah.
So now you have a patient, it hurts them when they go upstairs. That's a horrible outcome for hernia repair. So why not make sure the mesh minimizes how much overlap there is with this uncritical, non-critical structure like the psoas muscle.
Right.
So it's like tweaking things. It's like getting it's like a better mousetrap, so to speak. I'm not saying you don't need mousetraps.
Yeah. It's mesh evolved, right?
Yeah, it's the
from a
next
surgeon's
generation.
lens that has taken a ton of bad repairs out and has seen the byproduct of a bad repair and bad mesh.
That's exactly my experience. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I hope that actually takes off. And I mean, do you ever see a world with no mesh? Is there ever an opportunity where there's no need for mesh, or is that
not in my lifetime, but I would say less mesh. I hope there's a world with less mesh, more education on non-mesh repairs, which are totally fine. In my practice, I do that. I offer meshless repairs. I was only in first person to come up with meshless groin repair using the robot. But also for open surgery, there's like decades.
It has to do with the size of the defect, right?
Yes,
whether you use mesh or not.
It does.
Okay.
But there are products out there that have less total mesh, and they're in companies that are kind of like, they're not startups, so to speak, but they're smaller companies that are struggling because their competition is so huge and has so much of the contracts. The way the contracts, as you know, are negotiated, they ask for exclusivity, 80%, 90% exclusivity. So that puts out as much of their competition as possible. Meanwhile, there are patients that can benefit from like this
an alternative
mesh, but it's a smaller company. It's hard to get that it's hard to grow that company because it's hard to get contracts.
Yeah. So who are the big mesh companies there? I know Bard is one, right?
Bard is number one. Bard is number one in the world, both US and elsewhere. Number two, I would say currently, and don't quote me on these numbers, but based on my knowledge, is Medtronic. Ethicon used to be up there. They've, since the pelvic mesh disaster,
fiasco, yes. Yeah.
That really hurt them. They pulled away, and so they're no longer even marketing their hernia meshes. If you want to buy it, you can buy it, but there's no sales rep for it.
Right.
So Medtronic is number two. There's a couple, like the numbers 3 and 4 are kind of like Allergan with or now AbbVie, which is like the biologic meshes. There's Telebio, which is these hybrid meshes, and there's some other like smaller companies that are fighting for 3 and 4.
Got it. So because you're so narrowly focused, pun intended, in inguinals, I'm curious to figure out what is the future, independent of mesh. What if you had to wave a wand and say, this is what's going to happen with this space and this anatomy and this repair? What is that? What would it look like if you had all the stars aligned?
Yeah.
And even if you didn't, where do you think it's headed?
Well, the good news is, unlike when I was in training where no one liked hernia repairs and there were no hernia specialists, people love hernia repair, and Intuitive Surgical really was the reason why people are now interested in hernia repairs, hernia training. Robotic hernia surgery has really made it fun and interesting and more innovative than it was. So the market now has more surgeons interested in doing hernia repairs as opposed to it being like jack of all trades surgeon that also does hernias. And therefore, theoretically, hernia care should be elevated. And that implies that if you really like hernias, you're doing a lot of hernias, then you should start tailoring your care.
Mm-hmm.
And patients also will probably be looking for that doctor that understands hernia itself as like its own specialty, and then can give you options. It's like if you go to a breast surgeon nowadays, before everyone was doing breast surgery and gallbladder surgery, et cetera, but now you have actual breast surgeons. So they can talk to you about 5 different ways of treating the same breast lesion. The same should be eventually true for hernias, whereas most general surgeons offer you a hernia repair based on whatever they were taught during residency, and it's usually one technique. Those of us that love hernias will offer you open repair, laparoscopic, robotic, with mesh, without mesh, hybrid mesh, lightweight mesh. There's all these different ways of approaching the same problem. And I think patients hopefully will understand now they have choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you on back to, well, one, that there are going to be multiple options, but I do agree with you that Intuitive kind of put hernia repair on the map. I was there at Intuitive while that was happening, and I remember that's how we knew each other.
Yeah.
And I would say that, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I would say that prior to that, it was largely an open procedure or a laparoscopic, but had a lot of redos. And back in the day, I know current day people have evolved and the techniques have gotten better, but back in the day, it was kind of like, I feel like people were walking around with hernias all the time and just dealt with it as like a chronic pain issue and didn't see the solution as a viable solution for them. And so they kind of just lived with it, whether it was like a previous sports injury or, something that they just kind of accepted. But then I think when Intuitive opened up their whole general surgery channel, which was really, fun to be a part of. And that's when I really feel like that's actually when my husband's like, I actually think I have a hernia, and I think it started to connect that people, when they have the little twinge or the little like prick when they do a certain thing. And I do think that kind of started this whole revolution. Now that you mention it.
I agree because the only option you had outside of open was laparoscopic, and that was very hard to learn.
Yes.
The majority of surgeons were not comfortable offering that. They either didn't do it or they were not good at it. The learning curve was very, very steep. You had to do 500 inguinal hernia repairs to be considered like an expert at performing laparoscopic inguinals, a little bit less. But that number is down to like, I think 50 using the robot. So it's really improved access to minimally invasive care. Even small towns have now robots and surgeons are offering minimally invasive care, whereas before they were not offering laparoscopic, they were only offering open. We know that anything minimally invasive had lower risk of infection, usually less chronic pain, better long-term results usually. So it's all for the better.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm actually thrilled to have this on Leader Podcast because it's early, but we'll probably look back on this in 5 years and say, we talked about it. And it was just kind of in theory and largely in practice within your space. And by the way, do you have a product that's viable for you to use within patient care, or is it all still just in the patent phase?
There are ways to take a typical on the market mesh and tailor it to my design. So sometimes I do use it, but I always wished I had my own mesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to happen. I know you're the type of person that anything you put your head to is going to get done.
We'll celebrate. Let's do that.
Let's do it. Let's bring Holly too.
Let's bring Holly. And then once all of this is done and it's on the market for real, then I'll share in retrospect the journey I had to go through to get it done.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Right now, I'm in like a box. I don't know.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, anything we can do to help promote better patient care, I'm all for. That's why I stayed with Intuitive as long as I did, because I really did believe they were doing the patient a service above and beyond everyone else. I know there's a cost of robotics at the hospital level, and I know that there's a learning curve, although I think it's less than a laparoscopic learning curve. But I know there's a lot of barriers of entry for people beyond the patient. But I truly believe, I was a patient myself at Intuitive. I ended up getting pregnant after getting a fibroid removed. So I am very grateful for my third child and Intuitive for that matter. But I always saw them put the patient first in all the decisions they made. And so I think if this is a patient first solution, it will not fail, because I think that is the crux of all great innovations, is it's a patient first proposition. If someone's doing something just to make money, it'll never land. I mean, it may take off 10% adoption, but that critical, crossing the chasm, if you don't have a patient proposition. I've talked to a couple of robotic competitors in this space. I've consulted them.
Yeah.
And they all think they're going to take on the big dog, who we all know. And I'm like, good luck with that. Listen, I would love to see that.
You.
Yeah. It's 25 years of innovation and a lot of practice. And they have a head start on pretty much everyone. And I think creating something that specific that goes inside the patient's body, one, the FDA does not clear very often.
Yeah.
And two, there's a lot of engineering that goes into that. It's not an easy task to build a robot.
Gary, the president,
CEO,
he wrote the code.
I know.
For that himself.
I know. He's brilliant too.
So cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would love to see it become an open market, and I would love to see multiple robotic manufacturers in the game. I mean, I think that's good for everyone. I do think it's an evolved laparoscopic skill that all patients should have access to, independent of which city they live in or if they have access to a big shiny robot. But I do think that people underestimate what it takes to build a robot that actually works and provides better patient care.
So complicated. I have no idea how he did it. But I must say, the genius was coming up with a product, but then getting the education linked with it.
Yes.
Putting out a product without the investment education would
disaster. Yeah. Complete disaster. Well, hey, we're wrapping up on this episode, but I always have 3 questions that I ask every guest. Okay. And you are not immune. Okay. So I do this as a speed round. So I ask, you can answer them in any order. Sure. Who's a mentor that's made an impact on your life or career inside of business or outside of business? What's a book that's influenced your approach to business that others could read and learn from? And then also, what is a superpower of yours? So no particular order. Okay. All tough questions, but all fun.
I've been very fortunate to have a lot of fantastic mentors. I think my first really influential mentor was Dr. Thomas Byrne. Mm-hmm. He worked at USC for over 50 years. And the minute I hit USC, he took me under his wings and taught me everything. And he passed away the same year my dad passed away. So it was a very difficult year for me because all the important men in my life were gone.
I'm sorry.
And he was just, no one can replace him. Just the way that he cared so much, and he was such a smart person. I would say the second person, he probably doesn't know I'm going to say this, is Dr. Ed Phillips. I don't know if you know him. He is kind of the senior surgeon now at Cedars-Sinai, just a really intelligent surgeon, also an inventor. He collaborated with a lot of companies, and many of the laparoscopic products that we use today, he invented. He has some of the prototypes in his office. It's really kind of cool. I like that part of him. And he was a private practice surgeon during this time. So to be in private practice but have an academic bent and be an inventor, I think is just something that I've always wanted. And then lastly, the reason why I'm a hernia surgeon is because of Dr. Parviz Ahmed. He is the original Ahmed surgeon from the Liechtenstein times. Dr. Liechtenstein was his partner and
another person who named a product or a solution after himself.
Yeah, after his own name. Yeah. That turned out okay. But there's always that risk. But again, he was in private practice, started doing some product development in a pig lab on his own, and then worked with a company, and a lot of their meshes that he designed are what we use currently. So just a humble guy, published a lot, was always in the leadership of the American Hernia Society. He got me into the European Hernia Society. He's retired now, and he's just a great guy. So that's my mentorship.
Yep.
Situation.
Book and superpower.
My superpower, I think, is being female.
I love that.
Honestly,
especially in this generation. I love you owning that.
It completely defines how I approach things, how I think about things, why I choose topics to expand on. It's what makes me a better doctor and better surgeon, more empathetic. Yeah, I love being a female in a traditionally male world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely understand and appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah.
Having worked in a male-dominated industry my entire career, I don't fancy myself as a women libber, really, because it's just not my DNA to compare and contrast to others. But I do think there's power in strong women, and especially intelligent, strong women.
Yeah.
And I think we can take over the world, to be honest.
Agreed.
And we should.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last one is the book. Anything come to mind that made an impact on you that you'd want to share?
I read a lot of books. I like anything that has to do with like people's stories. So Hillary Clinton's book was really impactful to me. The one that she wrote herself. I don't know. I don't remember the name. I've read both of Michelle Obama's books. I'm currently reading Ruth Bader Ginsburg's book. I just like to learn about people's lives.
Like biographies?
Yeah, they're all biographies, autobiographies usually. I just love that. And they're well-written books. I don't like books that are poorly written. That really bothers me. My dad was a writer, and it needs to be well-written book.
Yeah.
So I'm very much into kind of understanding people's stories. You learn so much. I mean, there's great business books, Good to Great, all those kind of famous books. There's great leadership books. The Servant Leader, I really
love it.
I loved it for some reason.
Love it.
I think I'm a servant leader, so that really opened my eyes. Oh yeah, that's me.
That's like what I literally put my entire leadership style on is that book. Yeah. That and 1 Minute Manager, which were written by the same person.
1 Minute Manager, also great. Yeah. So I don't really read fiction. I used to when I was younger, but I just like to read about people's lives and stories.
I too, I'm not a fan of fiction. I've never read fiction. I think I read maybe when I was in college a couple of John Grisham books, but other than that, it's all either leadership, business, or, I'm a fan of the Bible too.
People's lives, stories. I love stories.
Yeah.
Like real stories. I really relate to that.
Well, listen, it's been a thrill to re-engage with you. I don't know how long ago it's been since I saw you in practice, but total fluke and coincidence. I remember seeing the email and I'm like, of course I'll have Dr. Tofai on. So I'm so happy that it worked out and so thrilled to have you on, Leader. And I do plan to follow your journey. And hopefully one of the big dogs is listening today.
There better be.
On that note, how do people reach you? How can they get a hold of you if they're interested in talking more about it, or where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to LinkedIn, or you can DM me on any of the social media platforms. I'm pretty active on social media, including X, Instagram, Facebook. I have my own YouTube channel for my podcast, Hernia Talk Live. And so, any of those, you can reach out to me.
That would be great.
Be careful. All I talk about is hernias.
Well, yeah, because you've just defined that this is your niche. This is the hill you'll die on, right? Hopefully not. But I actually, just on the note before we conclude, I, was a sales leader for my whole career. And I've always told people to stand out, define a niche. And even with Tribe, when I launched Tribe, I could have gone a mile wide and an inch deep, but I decided to stay in what I know, which is medical device. I've been in that my whole career. I actually originally planned on staying even within robotics, but I realized I have lived the life of robotics for over a decade, and I wanted to branch beyond that.
Yes.
Plus, I have kind of a bias towards intuitive, so I don't feel like I could actually do any help to anyone else. But I do believe in niching. I do believe you want to become a master of that domain.
100%.
Even as a rep, even as a medical rep, if you find something you're really good at, then they're going to call on you every time for that. You're going to be the person that they go to for that.
Yes.
Just like you've become the hernia repair person and, the person to call when something's really tough and complicated.
Yes.
Everyone needs to define their niche. And I think that's a great approach to life, just in general.
I learned that early on at USC, the chairman, Tom DeMeester, of the famous DeMeester score, by the way.
Yeah.
Talking about being named.
I remember DeMeester. Yeah.
That was his philosophy. I learned a lot from him. He said, go find a niche and just go as deep as you can into it, and you'll do really well.
Yeah. Well, again, it's a thrill to have you on. I'll look for this journey. I'll, look forward to a cocktail that you and Holly and I share.
Sure.
Maybe in Beverly Hills. Thank you again.
Thanks so much. I love this. Appreciate it.